Okay, back to Friend or Foe. We are on chapter 2, which is page 15 if you are able to follow at home. Chapter 2. It rained all the way from London to Exeter. Miss Roberts hardly lifted her head from her books, unless it was to pull out another packet of cigarettes from her handbag. David and Tucky played noughts and crosses until they ran out of paper, and they were then left staring out the window, waiting for the next stop. David passed the time by tracing drops of rain as they ran in the intricate and erratic patterns from the top of the window pane down towards the bottom. He would find 2 or 3 droplets that began life at the same time at the top and watch them race each other to the bottom, and sometimes they would join together and plummet down in a great flood. They stopped frequently, and that did help to break the monotony of the journey, and lunch of a sandwich and a biscuit at Westbury was a chance to stretch their legs and to empty the carriage of Miss Roberts's cigarette smoke. But lunch was Tucky's downfall. He began to go white almost as soon as the train pulled out of Westbury, and a few minutes later was as sick as a dog. Miss Roberts did her best, but there was no corridors on the train, so all she could do was to hold his head while the rest of them tried to keep as far away as possible. It was all cleared up at the next stop, but the after-smell still hung on, and Tucky's face was still a pale shade of green. He looked dreadful, and David tried to ignore him and to concentrate on the line of hills in the distance. He thought it looked like the pictures of Devon he'd been shown at school, but they were still hours away from Exeter, and as the journey dragged on, his thoughts returned again to his house in Islington. Tucky was feeling better. "My mum said it won't be long," he said suddenly. David said nothing. "She said the war would be over in a few months and we'd all be home again, so it won't be long, will it?" "Depends on who wins it," David said. "We'll win it," Paul Browning said from the other side of the carriage. "Everyone says we'll win it." "Then it'll be a long war." "Says who?" Paul was sneering. "That's what my dad said," David replied quietly. He hated mentioning his father, and he hadn't meant to. He felt vulnerable now. He said that if the Germans win, it'll be a short war, and if we win, it'll be long. "But we won last time," Tucky piped up. "We won then, didn't we?" "Yeah, he's right." Paul was leaning forward. "We won all right, and what can you do once, you can do again. That's right, ain't it, miss?" "What is, Paul?" Miss Roberts looked up. "The war, miss. Davy says we won't win it. You heard him, miss. We beat them last time, so we will again. Stands to reason, doesn't it, miss?" Miss Roberts closed her book. "No, Paul, it doesn't stand to reason." She sounded firm, and everyone listened when she sounded firm. "I think we shall win in the end. I certainly hope we do. But it will not be in a few weeks or a few months. It may take a long time to win. A year, 2 or 3 years, who knows? You must understand that you will not be going home for some time. You'll have a new home and a new school, and it won't be easy for you. But it will be a lot easier if you can understand that you won't be going home for a long time. One day we'll all go back to Islington, but not for a long time. Understand?" It could not have been clearer. David had won his duel with Paul, but it gave him no pleasure. He would gladly have lost one little argument for some ray of hope from Miss Roberts. There was none. The carriage fell silent and remained that way until the train pulled into Exeter station. It was dark already and they were hungry. Placards were put on, cases checked, then they were on the platform and out into the cold. Tucky and David stuck together while Miss Roberts gathered the whole school around her for a roll call. Then she led the way through the ticket barrier and towards a waiting bus. There were people everywhere, but it was not like the bustle and noise of Paddington. Here they were standing and staring solemnly as the boys staggered through the ticket hall. "Where are you boys from then, my dear?" The ticket collector put his hand on David's shoulder and turned him around. "London," said David. I know that, my dear, he laughed easily. I know that right enough, but whereabouts in London? David felt foolish and flushed. Islington, said Tucky. Not heard of that, have you? He asked around him, and everyone shook their head. Off you go then, my dear, keep on smiling. David did not know what he should be smiling about, and he could not help wondering how anyone could have reached the age of that ancient ticket collector without ever hearing of Islington. Talk funny, don't they? Said Tucky as they rushed after the others. Miss Roberts marshalled them into the dark green coach in the station yard, and David sat with Tucky on the long bench seat at the back and waited. They all waited, but nothing happened. Then someone realised the driver was missing, and a policeman went off in the dark to look for him. The boys sat numbed in their seats, every one of them exhausted too exhausted even to be homesick. The driver came back eventually, and there were angry words in front of the bus. Miss Evers was giving him a piece of her mind. The blackout was in force, and the headlights of the bus were hooded so that only a thin slit of light struck the road ahead. The engine throbbed underneath them, and the bus moved at last. This is the picture. The journey through the dark lanes seemed unending. David sensed they must be out in the countryside because there were no houses. All he could see were high hedges and the occasional glimpse of a field as the headlights skimmed over it through a gateway. No one spoke in the bus. It was too noisy, but no one felt like it anyway. Tucky had gone to sleep on David's shoulder, but kept waking up every few minutes to ask if they were there. Halfway down the coach, David could make out the shape of Miss Roberts's hat as it was lit up from time to time by the glow of her cigarette. This is it, the driver's voice shouted, and the coach slowed down. Tucky woke up with a start. Round this bend and you're here. Placards and cases, said Miss Roberts. Don't leave anything behind. And don't forget your cases, children, Miss Hardy echoed. Make sure it's your own case and no one else's. Check them now, children. The bus had stopped, but David could see nothing out of the windows. He rubbed an island clear of steam and peered through. They were in a small square surrounded by low buildings. A door was thrown open in the darkness, and a shaft of yellow light flooded out towards the coach. Everyone out! Miss Roberts walked sideways down the centre of the coach. And mind your manners now. The lights of the village hall were blinding at first, and David blinked and squinted his way down the hall. There were faces all around him, peering red faces and eyes that followed him. He looked away and followed on up some wooden steps onto a platform. There were 2 long benches, and David found himself in the back row, and Tucky slid in next to him. It was warm in the hall, and from somewhere came the smell of tomato soup, red tomato soup.